Thanks for the opportunity to speak before you today in support of Senate File 2056. As I said, I'm the COO for technology at Thomson Reuters, a Minnesota company going back to 1872, currently employer of about 7,000 professional people in Eagan. In addition, I was the chair of the Minnesota Ultra High-Speed Broadband Task Force appointed by our previous governor that issued a landmark report. If anybody wants a copy of it, I can still produce it for you. I'll be glad to send it to you. This is the one with the speed goals contained within it, I might add. So this was issued in October of 2009 about the state of broadband in Minnesota and the proposed goals, which were ultimately passed into law in May of 2010. As was stated here in the clarification, the senator correctly stated the speed goal ranges. The other part of the goal was that Minnesota would be in the top 5 states for broadband speed, universally accessible to residents and business across the board. So that is another important piece. The culmination of a dream in 1889 by James Hill led to the creation of the Great Northern Railroad, carrying freight, passengers, and mail across the country, thus creating many opportunities for resource economies and communities to thrive. Fast forward 125 years, access to high-speed broadband to accelerate our modern-day version of the transportation infrastructure is critical to provide tools needed for industries such as for public safety, education, and telemedicine all across Minnesota. Much like the introduction of electricity and the railway commerce, high-speed broadband is a universal facilitator. We will all need access in the future to thrive. In my testimony before the Senate in November of 2009, I said in part, we need to invest in it. It's also good economics. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce study, communities in which mass market broadband were available experienced more rapid growth in employment, the number of businesses overall, and businesses in IT-intensive sectors relative to comparable communities without broadband at that time. Further, as I testified, according to a recent at that time, statewide broadband mapping exercise, 94% of Minnesotans had access to broadband as defined by the FCC at the time. The remaining 6%, or about 97,000 households, or about 300,000 citizens, did not have access. If you look at the same data but use our proposed goals for 2015, only 17% Minnesotans met at that period in time. And I concluded that testimony with clearly we have a long way to go. Now if I fast forward to today, as of today, when we include mobile, which is an important factor, which has greatly expanded the availability, 99.8% of Minnesotans have access, leaving about 4,000 unserved according to the latest analysis by Connect Minnesota. When we look at our minimum goals today, roughly the 10.6 that we discussed, we are 74.5% available, including mobile. So while we've made some progress, we clearly have more progress to do to meet the state goal of universal access at the speed numbers that are in the statute. However, there are still areas in our state, mostly in rural areas of greater Minnesota, along with some spotty patches in our metro area where availability at our speed goal is non-existent, and reaching those households is still a challenge. While the rising tide of technology advancement has lifted all boats to help us get closer to the minimum goal, we are far from making progress to get into the top 5 in speed and access. The economic data and research is clear that access and use of high-speed broadband grows economies, as I said before, and provides access to markets and develops workforce for the 21st century economy, enabling and enables entrepreneurship. Minnesota simply cannot afford to fall behind our national and global economy as we become more dependent on high-speed broadband for connectivity. Senate File 2056 sets up a framework to establish partnerships and grants to further the objective of the state, meeting the goals established in law. Let me emphasize, it would be my hope that this bill would spur a series of public-private partnerships to help us meet the law's goals. The appropriation of $100 million is something we could not do when our task force met back when we wrote our report. Our state is in a better position to do this today. Now is the time to make the modest investment. I know there will be some other bills this committee and others will consider and hear in the coming days. They will help us, along with Senate Bill 56, which is 2056, which is a fine start. In closing, I urge you to approve and support Senate File 2056, including an appropriation to help push the state to the goals that are set in our state law. I'm happy to stand for any questions the committee may have.